What if everything you thought you knew about history was wrong? I mean, what if our entire past, from the Renaissance all the way back to the first cities, wasn't something that happened, but something that was written, like a script, by a secret organization?
So where do you even start with a claim that big? Well, the key that supposedly unlocks this whole thing begins with a person who shouldn't exist. Is it even possible for one man to be three of history's most legendary figures all living at the same time on completely different continents? The source we're looking at today says not only is the answer yes, but it's the clue that pulls the whole conspiracy into focus.
Get this. The theory is that these three monumental figures, a Renaissance polymath in Italy, a philosopher-king in Mexico, and the guy who basically built the Inca Empire in Peru, were all the same person. One operative, codenamed G. Now, just let that sink in for a second. This isn't presented as some bizarre historical coincidence. It's argued to be the deliberate signature of a much, much grander plan.
So, to really wrap our heads around this huge design, we have to start with the agent himself. Our investigation really kicks off with this so-called three-faced man, who the book says is the one loose thread that, if you pull it, could unravel the entire tapestry of accepted history.
The file on G lays out a pretty mind-blowing claim. He was born in the Americas, and he was sent to Europe on a very specific mission, to jumpstart a society the book calls bicameral. Now, what does that mean? The idea is that people back then didn't have consciousness like we do. They experienced their own thoughts as commands from gods or spirits. So when G showed up as a poet and a lawgiver, he wasn't just making art. He was basically programming these societies. And here's the supposed smoking gun. Records from the Americas talk all about his incredible skills, but European accounts of the very same man, they're weirdly silent on those exact talents.
But come on, a figure like G, no matter how brilliant, couldn't rewrite history all by himself, right? An agent this powerful implies there has to be an agency behind him. So, who is really pulling the strings?
The book calls them the Watch. And they're not just some secret society trying to influence events from the shadows. No, their goal is way bigger. It's to be the architects of history itself, to literally write the script that we all grow up learning as fact.
So what was their playbook? Well, according to this theory, it's a pretty clear strategy. First, you impose your own timeline, and you do that by wiping the slate clean. Just think of all the great libraries and indigenous records that have been burned throughout history. Second, you install a universal story template, the classic hero's journey, so that all of your engineered heroes feel familiar and mythic to us. And their key tool for all of this? Exploiting those bicameral societies we just talked about, populations that were uniquely vulnerable to commands that sounded like they were coming from the gods.
This whole pattern of manipulation, this playbook, it didn't just start in the 15th century. The book argues that you can find its echoes stretching all the way back to the very dawn of civilization.
The book argues that these major historical figures aren't unique individuals at all. Instead, it calls them fractal echoes, basically reoccurring archetypes that play out the same patterns over and over. And the prime example given is Sargon the Great, who's presented as just one fragment of G's ancient family tree.
And when you look at the parallels, they're pretty uncanny. Sargon uses spycraft to rise to power, a core skill of the G archetype. He becomes the first emperor to rule a massive multi-regional empire, which mirrors G's role as a universal man who can operate across different cultures. The book's conclusion? This isn't just history repeating itself. It's a script being reused.
And these echoes just keep on coming. Sargon's famous story of interpreting a dream for a king has a direct parallel, almost beat for beat, in the biblical story of Joseph in Egypt. Again, the source says this isn't a coincidence. It's another engineered narrative, a pattern deliberately planted in different cultures to reinforce certain ideas.
So if this group is inserting entire narratives into human culture, what are their biggest tools for mass psychological influence? According to the book, they use two main things: catastrophic myths and a kind of cryptographic controlled language.
Okay, check this out. Around 5600 BC, geologists are pretty certain there was a massive, catastrophic flood of the Black Sea. Now, what's really fascinating is what happens after that date. All of a sudden, the Great Flood myth just explodes across the ancient world. It shows up in Sumeria, in the Hebrew Bible, and in dozens of other cultures that supposedly had zero contact with each other.
So here's the crucial point. The book's much radical claim about this: the myth wasn't a shared memory of a real event. Instead, the story was deliberately and retroactively inserted into all these different cultures by the Watch. Why? To act as a psychological tool, like a great reset button for civilization's memory.
And alongside the myths, they allegedly controlled language itself. This proposed chain of events is wild. It starts with this undeciphered script near the Black Sea,
Then it moves to Sumerian, a language so unique it's perfect for secret codes, which is then adapted by the Akkadians to create the first real writing system. And from there, it's used for Hittite, which kicks off the global spread of Indo-European languages. The whole thing is presented as a deliberate, controlled rollout of information technology.
All of this, I mean all of it, leads to the ultimate question, why? What is the end goal of a deception this monumental, one that spans centuries?
The book proposes it's a two-pronged strategy. On one hand, the watch provides humanity with the tools it needs to build civilization, agriculture, technology, laws, but at the exact same time, they seize control of the story, managing the flow of information to guide our destiny and to crush any disruptions to their grand design.
And this really gets to the core idea of the whole theory. Mythology isn't just an accident of culture or a collection of quaint old stories. No, it's a technology, a system strategically built to engineer what people believe and ultimately to control them.
The final, mind-bending piece of the puzzle is the timeline itself. This theory of chronological compression suggests that the huge gaps in our history books, like the tens of thousands of years between when modern humans appeared and when they finally started farming, are artificial. The book argues that key events like agriculture and writing are actually way more recent, and that our timeline has been deliberately stretched to hide the Watcher's rapid, directed intervention in human history.
And that leaves us with a final, really unsettling thought. If the past is a construct, if it's a kind of operating system that humanity has been running on, it raises a huge question for us, right here and now. Can that coat be broken?
If you want to go deeper down this particular rabbit hole, the source material for today's explainer is available as a full audiobook. You can find it, along with a lot of supplemental material, at michaelanthonyalberta.com.